Welcome to the Kate and Dean podcast until otherwise notified.
I wanted to do like, whoo, 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 yeah, like an audience sound.
Yeah, we do. We've got that one audio sound thing that comes with it, but it's horrible.
It is horrible.
It's horrible. Well, we want to thank you for tuning into our shows. I'm Dean Nixon. This is the, as always, lovely Kate Semmens.
Hello, everybody.
We are excited to join you today. I was going to say tonight, but it's really not night. on our podcast, our weekly podcast. So we're super excited to get started. The last few episodes, we've been really working on the brain and the mind and the energy that we have. Tonight we have a different topic, going a totally different direction, similar but different. Again, we want to share with you that these are our views. These are views that come from the experiences of our lives working in the treatment industry, whether it be in crisis or whether it be running residential treatment centers or whether it be just working with people in crisis as we've done. With a combined, good grief, I can't even remember how many years, 50 plus years, 30 for myself and...
Yeah, 15 for me.
15 for you. Years of experience, this is our thoughts. So if you agree, great. If you disagree, great. Speak up, share your thoughts and feelings. So as we jump in, we want to move forward with an idea today.
Yes.
And the idea, Kate, is...
Well, I want to tell him how we came up with the topic because I think that it's awesome. So we sat down to start the podcast and Dean's like, well, what are you mad about, Kate? What makes you angry?
What makes you angry?
And I said, I'm pretty angry that anger is really hard for me to be able to express and to know how to handle and to cope and all of the things. And, both Dean and I are life coaches. And so I oftentimes get people in my office that have a really difficult time with the emotion and the expression of anger. And one of the places that we're going to take the podcast today, and I'm not sure when and about it will be, but a lot of those are women. I work with a lot of women, and
as do I,
as do you, yes. But as a woman, too,
as a
in
woman,
my own construct of my experience here on the planet, and. By the way, listener, if this is your first podcast, it is one of our the beautiful pieces, as far as I'm concerned, to the podcast is that we kind of look at things in the construct of stuff and what is or isn't true. And we like to call it the misconceptions of the mind. And so this anger piece, for me anyway, is a really big one of being raised as a girl and feeling like anger is something that is really bad for me to experience, and especially to express. So we're gonna kind of dodge and duck and dive and dip and dodgeball. Good, you got the reference. Dodgeball. I'm really proud of you.
No, I agree. And you brought that up about being a woman. And working with women, I can only echo it. I cannot experience it. I can echo your feelings because so many women come in and they're frustrated because the expression of anger isn't always acceptable. It's not feminine.
Right.
We live in a male dominant culture as far as the expression of anger goes. We know that for years we've been breaking these glass ceilings of women in the workplace, women in the world, and now we're even more, thank the Lord, addressing races and the disparagement between genders and races and all of these things, and we're getting better, America. We're in a crisis. Again, a timeline stamp here. We're in the middle of a crisis as far as with the Black Lives Matters movement coming out and really representing, a lot of people are saying, okay, we need to listen to people. And we've done some webisodes on that already. But it is where we are getting better. We are getting better. We're listening better. And we are working on it. But we still are miles away on so many issues. We've got this police violence issue and the disparagement between those that are being harmed in that line of fire, so to speak, metaphorically and physically.
Right.
But also with women and their ability to express themselves without coming across as a I can't.
Bitch.
I'm not going to say the word.
I know you're not.
Yeah, you can say it. You can say it for us on podcasts. But it's not okay, and it's one of the things that we want to talk about is anger itself, and really how healthy anger is, and when it's healthy and we're stifling it,
right.
That's not okay.
Right, how unhealthy that is. Absolutely. And I love that you've already led into this, Dean, because for me, really, all emotions are beautiful. They're all information. They're an expression of whatever it is that's going on inside of us, right? And so for me, I get a little bit frustrated when I experience an emotion and I feel shame or I feel guilt over feeling that, and that's part of that misconception of the mind or the construct that I either have put on myself or that I got from my great-great-grandmother or wherever it came from, right? However, all emotions are just really good information for us. And so the ones that we can sometimes feel are labeled taboo or bad or that they're not healthy. Let's talk about that. Let's just knock all of that right off the table, right in the beginning here. That any emotion that you experience, listener, is good. If we're talking good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Or healthy or unhealthy, we like to kind of shift that focus and that lens, right?
Yeah.
Is it working or is it not working? Any emotion that you feel, anything that comes in, just simply is. And it's information for you. It's just somebody inside of you raising their hand and saying, hey, this is happening right now, right? And maybe it's joy, maybe it's sorrow, maybe it's anger, maybe it's anxiety. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Envy, yeah.
Lust.
Yeah.
Hurt.
So thousands of the emotions that we get to experience
Joy.
as a human species, which is kind of something that separates us, as we've talked in other podcasts, from different species on this planet. So therefore, anything that comes in, should basically be a celebration. Hey, I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I'm still having an experience. I'm creating emotions. So everything that comes in is just information. And so there's no good or bad hierarchy here, right? And so in the course of the podcast, we really want to help start to shift that language, like I just recently said, to is this healthy or is it unhealthy? Is this working for me or not working? When we talk about behaviors and expression of, today we're going to be really focusing on anger, but
right, and I love that you brought that up, because all emotions that we experience, you're right, they are good emotions and they are healthy emotions, and the fact that we're experiencing them is healthy.
Yes.
And here's the caveat. It's what we do with the emotions that gets confusing. It's what we do and how we respond to them that gets dicey and gets confusing. And this is where a lot of messages get sent to people that, it's not okay for you to do that. So, for example, like you were talking about with women, coming across as angry isn't okay. But for men, the old cliche is men don't what?
Cry.
Men don't cry.
Absolutely.
Boys don't cry.
Absolutely.
So the expression of tears or sadness or hurt for a man is something that's not okay for us to express either. And so we get to this point where, where is the line? But then the other part that we have to look at is, when does carrying the emotion become unhealthy? How long we hold it.
Right.
So if we think about emotions like an embrace, that's how I like to think about them. It's like a hug.
Like a hug.
It's like a hug, right? The emotions are like a hug. When they come in, we have to hug them. We have to feel them. We have to embrace them. But you know what I'm talking about, when somebody's hugged you just a little too long. And it starts to get a little awkward.
Dean, physical touch is my love language. That doesn't exist in my world. But
I could roll all day.
Maybe if it was a complete stranger whose energy was a little bit off to me, I'd be okay, this is awkward.
This is not okay. And it's the same thing with certain emotions. There's certain emotions that come in that we need to make sure that we don't hang on to too long. I threw that one, lust, in there for a reason, because I can't tell you how many times I've had clients, male and female, come in and they tell me how guilty they feel because they had an emotion of lust over an individual that came, somebody that they met at PTA or somebody that they met maybe of the same gender or whatever the scenario is. And they go immediately into guilt and they go immediately into shame because they hung on to it too long instead of looking at it like, well, that's interesting. That's interesting information. And I don't want to hang on to that. I don't want to walk with that any farther. And we don't have to. But it's that now I'm hanging on to it too long.
Yes.
It's the same thing with anger. If I hang on to anger too long, and if I keep rolling on that anger, then it becomes super unhealthy.
Absolutely. And I feel like the exact opposite of that is completely true as well. So if the goal, if the healthy expression is to be able to embrace the emotion, give it a nice appropriate squeeze of a hug, and then let it go. If we absolutely refuse to even go in for the hug, and we avoid it, and we try to push it down and suppress it and ignore it, it is just as damaging and unhealthy as continuing to fuel the fire of whatever that emotion is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you create a lineup of hugs just waiting. And, that's the part. Like, you can push it down. They're just waiting. That emotion is waiting.
Right.
And if we're using that metaphor, you're just creating a line of hugs. You're going to eventually have to deal with this stuff.
Right.
And so the more that you shove this down, the more that you put it off, that's all you're doing is putting it off. And I see it really becoming debilitating, I think that's the word.
Yeah.
And destroying people, even emotionally and physically physical expressions of poor health that will come from shoving anger down, shoving rage down, shoving hurt down, shoving sadness down, shoving all these things down. And the physical, and we were just talking about it on our webisode on Facebook and Instagram tonight, there are issues when we ignore the cues that are coming in, as you put it.
Absolutely. And there is like a whole section of science and psychology that people have dedicated their lives to in the uncovering of the different places where our body holds on to these emotions that we haven't processed through appropriately and haven't embraced, and the different diseases and I love that word disease, right? Is just dis-ease. It's an off alignment. And so the things that can be really physically manifested a lot of times come from this exact thing that we're talking about right now. The inability, or I guess we'll just roll with that word, or unwillingness to process emotions in a healthy way, because they just get stuck. Like there's so many books, but the one that's coming to my mind right now is Feelings Buried Alive Never Die, right?
Right.
And there's an entire sections in this book going through different emotions and how that can express itself in the body, so much so that there's like little flashcards that you can like carry with you. They're in my purse, actually, because I tend to lean into this way of thought, like.
And the book is based upon the idea of repressed emotion. Right.
Of, unfelt, unexpressed, any of that kind of stuff, emotion. And we do that. And like you're talking about, in every single one of us on this planet has had that experience at one point or another, and probably multiple experiences.
And experiencing it now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I want to take the anger part a little bit in a different spin for a minute too. And one of the things that we're always talking about is how anger is a secondary emotion. It's an expression. And it's a cover emotion. So in other words, anger, like there's two of them, anger and boredom. And both of these are cover emotions for what's underneath the surface. So if you think about anger as the top, the icing on the cake, it's what is the cake made of? And that a lot of times, the reason why we're angry is also because of the repressed and suppressed emotions of sadness, guilt, shame, hurt, embarrassment, not feeling worthy, all of that. And so we shove all of that down, and then we wonder why people are so angry, right?
Right.
Then we take a woman and we say, oh, but you can't express your anger.
Right.
So let's just put another layer, a little fondant over the top, a little tougher layer over the top, because we say, well, you can't express anger in this way, or you can't express anger in that way.
Yeah. which now we're not, I mean, we've just created like the most nasty mud pie ever. It's not even like this beautiful cake anymore, right?
Right. And it's just full of all this hurt and all this pain and all this embarrassment and all this shame and being told you can and can't, etc.
Exactly.
Not honoring emotions, not honoring feelings that are really there. And that's what we've got to learn how to do, is we've got to learn how to honor those feelings and deal with that. But so anger is a secondary emotion. Anger, a lot of times when people are angry, we need to stop. We need to look inside of ourselves and say, what's really going on?
Right.
And you got to get honest with yourself. You got to sit down, you got to look in the mirror, and you got to go, what's really going on? What am I really mad about? And what you're going to find is underneath that, there's going to be some kind of a breadcrumb trail that if you follow it, it's going to lead you to what's really going on down there. And oftentimes, it is hurt, it is sadness, it is anger, the anger of feeling left out, or the feelings of not being heard or abandonment. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now in our world. As we have all this anger, and everybody's like, God, we got to stop all this anger. Why is everybody so angry? And we're always preaching love, and that's a part of it. But that's the part we have to recognize, is that love and hate aren't opposites. We've got the world trying to sell us that love and the opposite of hate is love, and we just need to. No. On the emotional spectrum, love and hate are right next to each other.
They're both very passionate.
They're both passionate. Plus, one doesn't exist without the other, right? And so when we get the hate, it's because we don't feel loved. That's why we get the hate. And we feel rejected. That's why we get the hate. The opposite of anger, of hate, the opposite of hate and love is ambivalence.
Right. Yes.
Right? And so we know the opposite is ambivalence, and we see it playing itself out in the world where people are ambivalent to the issues. And so now people are so ambivalent to the issues, well, now we're seeing it expressing itself as anger and rage, but what's really underneath the anger is the hurt. The sadness, the sorrow, not feeling worthy, not feeling heard, not feeling loved. That's what's underneath all of this anger. And if we really stop and look at ourselves as the world, and we say, okay, why am I so angry driving down the road and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs at the traffic ahead of me? And you really sit down and go, why am I so angry right now? You may find that there's some other uncovered things that need to be talked through and walked through. Absolutely. And I love that we already brought in this secondary emotion piece to it. And then to add the layer that we're talking on right now about the inability to express it at times, right? So if you have a cake made out of hurts and pains and sorrow, and then you cover it with anger, but then you put a sheet over it because you're not supposed to look at it or express it, right? Then that's even all of the more unrest, disease, just and then
downward spiral.
You put the sheet over it and paint a smile.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
That's what goes through my head when you said it. And then you put a sheet. I was waiting for you to say.
And then paint your just everything's fine and dandy, rosy colored glasses life, right? How much more do we need to see expressed in our world of like the outrage, right? Because there are healthy and unhealthy ways to be able to express the anger. So it's important, number one, to feel your emotions and to express them healthy, and not stuff them down and cause all sorts of havoc in your mind, heart, and in your physical body. But then that expressing it healthy part as well is pretty huge, right? I love when you say that. I think about the book The Mastery of Love by Miguel Ruiz. Yes, beautiful book. If you have not read that, listener, that is next on your list.
Put that on your recommended list.
So good.
The Mastery of Love, Miguel Ruiz. And when I think about his book, at the beginning, in the very opening of his book, he starts talking about the poison that we carry inside of us. And a lot of times what we do is we carry that poison around, and then we inject that poison into other people. And so I think about it like a snake bite. I think about it like the poison like a snake bite or snake venom. And oftentimes we start feeling this angst and this hurt and this sadness and this pain. And so instead of expressing anger in a healthy way, we lash out at others, and we do it inappropriately. In our industry, we call it displaced anger. Right? So displaced anger, listener, is when I'm mad because I've had a really bad day at work, and I go home and I lose my temper with my kids. And they haven't done anything. Right. They're just, playing in the Cheerios, and they get all over the carpet, and I lose my mind. And that's displaced anger. So I'm really not angry at my children. I'm just angry at the situation that I'm in at work, and so now I'm lashing out. So what Miguel is proposing is, in those moments, unintentionally, we're snake biting our children. We're putting that venom inside of them, and so then they carry that venom, and they have that angst and that hurt and that frustration from that interaction, and so then maybe they go and they lash out on, a sibling or a pet, or
that's what I was thinking. It's the kick the dog syndrome, right?
No
animals were harmed in this podcast. But that's what people call it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Is that expression right there.
Because it rolls downhill, so to speak.
Exactly.
And then we get to a point where sometimes we can't roll it downhill, and so we carry that anger, and we harbor that venom, and we harbor that pain. And if we think about that cake that you're talking about, when we get to a point where we don't feel like we can express the anger. So we have the sheet, as you put it, and paint the smile on, and now we're just carrying this poison around inside of us, and it's creating dis-ease. It's creating disease within our body, and or we take it out on those that we're closest to. We'll take it out on a loved one, somebody that we're very fond of, and we'll take it out in inappropriate ways. We'll lash out, and some people will have this where they'll get into an argument with another person, and they can't stop themselves.
Right.
And I've been there. I'm sure everybody has.
Yeah.
But you're so angry, you just can't stop talking, and you keep going and going because you can't back down, right? You can't back down, and physical violence isn't in your wheelhouse, and so you can't hurt somebody physically, so we go after them emotionally.
Right.
And it's that displaced anger because we're not harvesting that emotion in a healthy way.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. When it expresses itself, instead of giving it a big hug, talking it out with somebody there, or trying to get some sort of resolution to whatever it is that has caused the emotion to come up in the first place, then it just builds. And in my mind, keeping using this analogy, the sheet that's covering the cake, what's underneath it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it can't. It's got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And even while we're talking about this, Dean, oftentimes when we talk about those pretty horrible things that oftentimes humans can do to each other, and I'm thinking about when people murder somebody or go in and shoot up a school or all that kind of stuff,
or abuse,
yeah. or any of those
any
things.
form of abuse.
Yeah. I'm not saying that this is in every single scenario, but this is probably playing itself out in those situations, so much anger that happens and just keeps compounding and compounding and compounding until they just crack and go do something to express that in a really unhealthy way.
Right. Yeah. And we'll see that a lot in acts of violence.
Yes.
We'll see it in rage. The abuses that we see are, out of the anger. The unexpressed anger is more going to be crimes of passion type of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Rather than the other types of abuses that are out there. But you might see them expressed through mental and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
And et cetera. But yeah, absolutely. And so that's where we've got to learn how to express anger, in a healthy way. Plus, we need to be able to teach and help people learn how to express anger in a healthy way. And there's a couple pieces to expressing anger that we really need to walk through, but it's also important imperative that people understand kind of that depth of it. So what I want people to really be getting from what we've been talking about so far, hopefully you are, is that anger is a healthy thing. Anger is a catalyst, anger is a catalyst for change. So anger, like physical pain in a body. So if you are walking with a rock in your shoe, then you're going to go, dang, I need to take my shoe off. I need to pull the rock out because my foot hurts. So if you're walking around and you're angry and you're carrying this anger, but you've painted a sheet with a smile on top of it, and you're walking around pretending, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's important, because that catalyst to change, that catalyst to growth is really what it is that's what it is. Anger is there for, is to say, hey, person, people, human, you need to pull that rock out of your shoe emotionally. You need to find a way to vent or express that. Now, I have been in places in my life and felt this way. And so in transparency, I'll share it.
I love it when you get transparent.
I'm not as comfortable with it as you are. So thank you.
I don't know if I'm really comfortable with it. Just like,
you just do it so naturally it looks comfortable. But there have been times in my life where things have occurred and happened to me that were out of my control, especially as a child. And I've had a lot of things that have happened to me as an adult that were out of my control. And the interesting thing to me about it is that as a child, when I finally figured out that I could express my anger in a violent way, I did.
Oh, yeah.
And I would act out violently. But I was also a very tender-hearted person. So then when I found out that acting those things out violently, if I couldn't find somebody that I could justify hurting, then I turned to hurting myself. And turned it inward, as we call it, depression, etc. So I wound up hurting myself and doing other things that were unhealthy and using substances and whatnot. The funny part about that, which isn't really funny, peculiar part about that is, as an adult, I have had things that have occurred to me that were out of my control, but I didn't feel like I could express them. And I knew better than to hurt myself anymore. I knew better than to even physically take them out on people that I felt justified doing so, because I'm a nonviolent person nowadays. My children, my oldest son calls me soft now. I don't go into those rages. I don't go into those things that I used to. So then it has pushed me into this place where I've had to figure out what to do with all of this anger. I'm so mad. And I've had to learn how to express my anger in a healthy way as an adult. And that really pissed me off.
Just that process of figuring it out made you even more angry.
It made me even more mad.
Yes.
Because the reality is, it was easier for me as a child to go out and take it out on somebody that I felt justified acting out towards. But the reality was, it just promoted more anger, it created more angst, it created more backlash, it created more issues.
Right.
And it was a never-ending process that it was like, the more you punch it, the more it gets on you, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? And so I realized I can't keep going there with my anger. I can't keep being this angry, violent, self-harming, individual. I have got to grow up. I've got to mature out of that. And that's where I finally figured out how to start to manage the anger and how to still be an angry person and feel the anger, because that's the other part I want the listeners to understand, is that just because you work through those issues doesn't mean that you're done being angry about it. Like, I'm still angry. I'm still super, super duper pissed about the things that happened to me when I was a child.
Sure. And it's probably, can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah.
It probably just...
Well, maybe. No, go ahead.
Well, my experience of you is that sometimes it really does come up and surface and really bring in a lot of that emotion, and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
So it kind of depends on kind of just the cadence of your life at that moment, which is the same for all of us, right? I think we all have experiences, traumas, past hurts and pains that sometimes we get quote unquote triggered, right? Like one of those catchphrases that we love right now. If you're a teen, everything's getting triggered. Right? We can get really triggered and have a really emotional reaction where you would experience that anger like deeply again, right?
Right.
Or you could be in a different place and maybe just gotten out of meditation or something, right? And have a trigger and be like, okay, and not have that same emotional arousal.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, and a lot of it has to do with how I'm processing my life. Mm-hmm. And when I'm feeling in a state of, things are happening out of my control that I don't like, then it compounds it. It'll resurface. I'll be angry about it again. I'll be enraged about it again. And again, I have to start to deploy coping skills, coping mechanisms to talk myself off that ledge. Where, yes, when I'm managing my emotions well, when I'm working in that meditation, where I'm accepting, because that's my go-to coping skill is acceptance. When I have an abundance of acceptance in me, then I'll have things that are happening to me that feel out of control. I tend to process them a lot better, and then it does that stuff from the past never even surfaces again. And I think that's the part where people, when I have clients come in and they're really frustrated that, why am I still dealing with this? Why am I still dealing with this? Well, is your heart still pumping? Right. Right?
Right.
Are you still breathing in and out? Then it's going to keep resurfacing. Yes. But as you put it so well, are you managing your emotions? Are you in an emotional management state of mind? Or are you in the world is coming at me and I can't stop it state of mind?
Yes.
And that's going to either push the anger or it's going to distill it and kind of diffuse the anger and allow it to leave.
I mean, really, you could just say an expression of how many emotional hugs are you behind on giving? Because if you've got a lot stacked up, going to that analogy in the beginning, right? Then the easier it is to keep stacking and to be more reactive.
Oh yeah.
Than if there's just a couple waiting in line, then you probably I probably can manage those other pieces that come in a lot easier.
Yeah, well put.
Or at least a lot more healthy. It's not easy. No, easier was the wrong word.
And there were so many years of just pushing it down. We're talking almost 30 years of just pushing that stuff down and pushing it down before I even started to address it. So you're talking like 30 years of a line of hugs that I have to embrace. Where some of the things that have been happening currently, it's like a year, it's like 2 years, it's like maybe 3 years max that I am, still like, okay, here it is again. But it's getting easier and easier and easier. And I think that's what we've got to recognize is how to manage these pieces and how to really deal with and push that anger down, kind of pull that, not push it down, but pull that paper layer off with the smile and start to put our fingers down through the fondant and really reach down underneath and start to process what's going on.
Absolutely, 100%. And so you were talking about the two different ways to be able to do that. And I don't know where you were headed with that, but I've got my two ways.
Well, let's hear your two ways.
Two different. So in that pulling into the fondant and taking a look at it, first of all, you need to be able to express it, right? It needs to, especially with anger, it's very kinetic, it's very physical. We viscerally feel it. I know right now when we're talking about anger, I'm sure, listener, you can take a minute and zero in on where you feel your anger, like how that expresses. It's like me, I feel like my face is on fire. Like I just like flames on the side of my face, and my heart just gets really churny. Like that's how I feel anger. And so when you start to feel that, I feel like that there's two ways to be able to move that emotional energy, and that's physically, and that's, for me, it's communication.
Yeah, I need to talk it
I need
through.
To speak it out, and I need to move my body just to get that kinetic energy. It's a lot of times, I know I have a lot of friends that are school teachers and kids that get like a lot of pent up emotion or, aggression. It's like, let's go do a lap around the track, because like physically moving your body with that is really, really helpful. It's the same reason that people want to punch something, right? They just got to like move their body.
Right.
So kickboxing is like really helpful with that. And Taekwondo, like there's really beautiful, healthy ways to be able to learn how to move your body in order to be able to let that emotion physically express itself.
Yes.
And I like would just really challenge and encourage everybody listening to start to get curious about that in your life. Like start doing your detective work to find out what it is that really does work for you.
Right.
And it could be situational too. Like when if I get angry at my significant other, then these can be my go-to things about how to healthily express that, right? Or if I get angry about a social situation in the world, these are the different tactics that I can deploy in order to be able to more healthily express that. But for me, those are the two big ones, is to get physical, to move my body, and then the second one is to communicate, and in a healthy way, right? Where we're just expressing like, hey, that didn't really work for me, or this is what I felt when that happened. And then I got really angry because where the treasure lies is what we're talking about, is deep in that cake bit. Once we can get through the fondant, that's where the treasure is that you're going to find and be able to really start to make some beautiful transformations and transitions in your life, to be able to say, okay, wow, I'm actually feeling really unloved right now. And that's why I'm feeling really angry. What can I do to increase my self-love in my world, right?
Yeah.
And then be able to have that flower expression come up instead of just the cake with the fondant, throw the sheet over it and slap some paint on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with yours, and that was one of the areas I wanted. I was headed with it as well.
Oh,
so obviously,
we're on the same page.
We're on the same page, because it's about, first of all, is we have to, and so my two would be, first we have to acknowledge it.
Oh yeah.
Right. Sure. And so it's very similar to what you're saying, is we have to feel it. We have to acknowledge the anger. And then as we do, the second piece is we have to really step back and ask ourselves, what am I really feeling? Mm-hmm. Then we can express it.
Go into
the expression.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your idea. There's that physical expression of getting out and punching a punch bag or kickboxing activities. For me, it's the gym.
Yeah.
I've got to get out. I've got to get physical. I've got to do something that really pushes me, and I can allow myself to do that in a powerful way. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to express it. Once we've expressed it, now we have to, as you put it so well, we need to look at what's the lesson in it. Mm-hmm. What's the message in the madness?
Right.
And I mean that literally. Message in the madness.
Mad.
So if you're mad, if you're angry, there's a lesson that you need. There's a lesson that's waiting to be learned. And the only way that you're going to get the message in the madness is by really doing that process. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't express the anger. They repress the anger. Mm-hmm. And so they miss a lot of messages. Mm-hmm. And we hang on to that in a very unhealthy way. Where we get unhealthy with anger is when we lash out at people.
Yes.
And we start trying to hurt people.
Yeah, like you were just talking about a minute ago, right? Like to physically hurt somebody, because we like with anger, we feel physically like we have to do something. And so you can do the healthy route, or you could do the unhealthy route where you physically lash out, and then in my experience, that is as far as it goes, right? It's just like, I'm going to be really aggressive and I just got to get this anger out, but I'm not going to understand why it is that I'm really angry.
Right. Yeah, and we talk about that in the 8 coping skills. We get to coping skill number 8 is resolution. Mm-hmm. There should be some resolution there. You've got to have some resolution around the anger, because if there's no lesson in it, if you're not creating something, and I do see that. I see a lot of people that would just keep being angry because it feels good, and I feel the endorphin release, and I see that a lot in our world right now, where it's just angry meme after angry meme after angry meme, and the reality is they're just feeding off that adrenaline. They're feeding off of that. And you can become really, really addicted to that, that rage that we can get into. But there's no resolution to it. It's like anger serves a purpose.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that's, I think, the unhealthy side of anger is where we just respond or react to every single thing in anger because it just feels good. And so now we just destroy the cake.
Right.
And then a new cake comes, bam, I destroy it. And I'm just, bam, next cake, destroy it. I never get down into the layers. I never get down underneath and go, okay, well, what's really going on under here? I'm just lashing out every time. It surfaces, bam, destroy the cake.
Right.
And I see that happening a lot with, that's kind of the mentality, is if you don't like it, just hate it.
Yeah.
Just throw hate at it, destroy it, shut it down, don't feel it, don't express it. But underneath that is in the madness is we have to ask, what did I learn? What's in here for me? What is the resolution?
Right. And we've already kind of led into what's been going on culturally right now, right? And it's always, for me, so beautiful to see those expressions come out of good, healthy creation of anger to be able to move towards a catalyst of change, right? And then we see the opposite of that. We see the looting and the rioting and the scare. Like, for me, that's scary when I see that versus like a peaceful protest or a parade or, getting in and writing congressmen. Like, there's been a number of different bills and laws that have been passed just in the last little while that have really been amazing forward motion to help heal some of the hurts that have caused a lot of this anger. Like, we have a really cool social window right now to just watch exactly what we're talking about play itself out on both of those sides, right? Like the extreme side as well as the healthy change-making expression.
Yeah. Anger, when we're not using anger as a catalyst, when we're using anger to just create more anger. And I think I take your point very well in the sense that, when we get these other individuals that are coming in and they start in these peaceful protests, and then we get these people that are coming in as agitators. And the agitators are ones that really are coming in. They're not there to peacefully protest.
Yeah, they're not solution seeking.
They're in there to instigate. And those agitators, and people don't get this, but they're actually paid people. And that's something that I don't think people recognize is these paid agitators, they come in and they go into communities and they incite the rage and the anger because it sells papers better, because it creates more rage and more hate, and it keeps everything going. Where in reality is these peaceful protests or these protests where people are kneeling or doing these other things that are, I love seeing the police officers who, took a knee, and I see these things, and these messages that are being sent, are of messages of, okay, I hear you, and the people that are wanting to be heard are feeling heard. That's the beauty. But then when you get these agitators who are coming in and bashing in windows and looting stores and doing all these other things, that is not going to be heard. That message won't be heard. And it's the same thing with us. When we have anger or rage in our families, when we have this hurt and this pain in our families, and when we're just running around, slapping anger on people and raging and lashing out at people and blaming everybody for your issues and blaming your mom and dad for this and that and pointing fingers and getting into all this other stuff where we're agitators, but there's no resolution. And in some families, your resolution may be no resolution with the family member, but it may have to be within yourself.
Right.
Because sometimes, family members, families and people can be so toxic that really sitting down with them and creating resolution between you and them is never going to happen.
Right. The resolution will be the boundary that you put in for yourself as to the exposure that you give that individual in your life.
That individual.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that is always intriguing to me is I remember, so again, being transparent, growing up with the severe learning disability and dyslexia issue. And I remember my fourth grade teacher, I don't even know her name, I just remember that she would just say to me, because I couldn't tell time, Dean, it's time to go to dummy class.
Right.
And so many people have asked me, don't you want to go back and find that person? Don't you want to go back and create, like, hey, look at me now type of thing.
Right.
And, even my father has made those comments. He's like, man, I wish we could get those teachers and, back then and show them where you are now. But there's no resolution in that for me. That's not going to bring, resolution. So what it really is a boundary between me and the anger, between me and that individual, where I say, you know what, I have to find resolution and forgiveness. And I've been able to do that and go, you know what, she was probably brand new. She was probably young. She's probably awkward, uncomfortable, didn't know how to deal with it, didn't understand it, didn't believe it, whatever it is, and let it go. And so we've got to do the same thing there are some people in our families and people that we work with or people in our lives that there's so much anger and rage towards that person, but trying to confront that person or to talk those things out is going to make things worse. So it's actually healthier to say, okay, well, the resolution is going to have to be between me and me.
Yeah.
But I can, like you said, I can go to one of my dear friends and I can talk it through with them.
Right.
I can even go to one of my dear friends and say, will you stand in proxy for?
Yes.
Right? I can sit down and say, hey, Kate, I'm really angry at this teacher. Would you be okay if you represented her and I represented me and I have this conversation with her in a healing, healthy, loving way?
Yes.
Not in a raging, And we can do that and still be able to create resolution between us and other individuals by putting somebody in there in proxy. And that can be a healthy way to deal with that anger and rage.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many beautiful ways to be able to process that. And the kind of amazing bit with this piece that you've just brought in, Dean, is how effective it is.
Yes.
Right? It's not like hocus pocus, just do it to like feel better for a minute. It is actual healing that happens when you do that, even if it would be to express it to a proxy or write a letter that you're never going to send.
That's the other one I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, or like journal some stuff out. Like I have a specific journal for the hurts and aches and pains and things that I feel that I don't feel really safe fully expressing to someone out loud in vocabulary.
Right.
So to be able to write all of that stuff down, and then when it's full, I burn it. That's what I do with it.
Yes, and I love that. And so one of the things I want to encourage people, and I know you probably already do this, is as you're writing those things down, make sure that there's resolution on the end.
Yes.
Otherwise, it just becomes a very dark journal.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I know you're probably already doing that as a tool, but you're right, burn it.
Yeah.
Because that's not something
you ain't nobody you want to read that.
Grandkids picking that up and going, oh my Lord.
Right, exactly. So if you can bring in the space for allowing for the humanity to have happened, which is what I always like to call it, right? Like with your fourth grade teacher, to allow her to be human and have made a mistake, right?
Right.
And so for me, that is oftentimes where that resolution can come in. Or oftentimes I'll even... And I know that this is a different kind of therapeutic modality, is to write as if you were the other person, expressing your sorrow for hurting your feelings, right? Like, so if you were writing as if you were your fourth grade teacher, like, Dear Dean, I am so sorry that I made you feel that way.
Yeah.
Like that can bring in a lot of that resolution and being able to kind of look at things from a different perspective, but be able to really be and kind and generous to you, because mostly the pieces that we're talking about with all these things have a layer and a thread that goes back to when we were really young.
And I love that you say that, because that's oftentimes what we need to feel heard.
Yes.
And so having that where I sit down, if I went through that process and wrote a letter in her behalf to myself, then I would feel heard. And for some of you, there are people in your life that you will never feel heard. Yeah. And they may never have the power, capacity, emotional intellect, or whatever it is to ever have that conversation with them. And I've got people like that in my life where there's never going to be a time where they sit down with me and they truly apologize for what happened.
And they may not even be here on the planet anymore.
And some of them probably aren't. But the point being is that to hear from them is powerful. Now, I know you dog-eared that as a therapeutic technique, but you don't have to be a therapist.
No, not at all.
To do some of these things.
Yeah.
This is not, you don't have to go to a therapist. It doesn't have to be that. one of the other things that I think is important in the expression of anger that can be extremely healthy is finding an individual that you can just talk to about what's going on, that they don't say anything.
Yes.
They just are there with an empathetic view and face and emotion and affect.
Yes.
And what's great about that is that you are saying it out loud and you're listening to yourself. Again, this goes under the how am I heard place. Now, here's the point in doing all this. So in all these techniques and things that we're talking about, that Kate and I are bringing up right now, the whole purpose in doing these things is to put your fingers down in the cake and find out what's underneath.
Yes.
So it's not like, oh, I'm going to go out and like chop wood and then never deal with it. It's like, go out and chop wood, but whatever's coming up after you chop the wood, sit down and journal, sit down and write a letter, talk to do it through with a proxy. Do all of these use all these tools to bring resolution to the anger. And that's the part. And speaking of, and we kind of talked about this at the beginning, is, women, if you're out there and you're feeling like, hey, I can't express anger, it's not womanly,
right? Then
the only thing you got to do is break the barrier. There's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us out here that are waiting to support you.
Yes.
They're waiting. I'm waiting to support you. I'm waiting. Go. I'm here. Go. I got your back. I got your play. As long as you aren't hurting another individual, or hurting yourself or destroying property, I got your back.
Right. We have a women's support and empowerment group that I am the facilitator of every Wednesday.
Yep.
And I love that you brought in that piece of finding the places that you can say, hey, I just need to vent right now. And that's kind of one of our ground rules in our group, is that to be able to communicate, I'm just looking for a really safe place, and what I like to call it is just like to word vomit, right? Because oftentimes, like you were saying, I don't really need to come and sit down and have a therapy or a coaching session. I just need to get it out of my head, get that monster out of my head.
Right.
And oftentimes I can do a lot of learning and coaching and teaching myself just by articulating it and having a safe space to do that by saying, I'm not looking for any advice or solutions. I just need to get this out of my head and out of my heart.
Right.
And it's so completely powerful to be able to have, especially as a woman, a group of women to be able to do that and be able to have that expression with. But then also sometimes you might want solution help and some advice and different perspective. And so to be able to communicate that, hey, I would really like to share with you something that's really been bothering me. And if you have any advice afterward, I would be really grateful to hear it. Or I'm not looking for that, right? So it's all about communicating what it is that you need as well.
Absolutely.
But a big, huge point that we are trying to drive home here is do not stuff it. Don't cover it up. Go for it. Express it beautifully and in your own way that isn't hurtful and hateful.
Exactly.
And you're going to be able to find down that layer of what it is that's really happening. What part of you is really sad or hurt or lonely, or all of the other feelings that we feel that anger just is that fondant layer like we've talked about.
Right. And the other piece I want to add before we go, because we're getting close here, but as you put it so well, and that's what I love about your group, is you're surrounding yourself with people that will support you in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. You don't want people that are going to throw gas on the fire. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people mistake that for caring. People mistake that I'm talking, I'm raged, I'm angry, and you've got people like, you're right, you should feel that way, you should, let's go egg their house.
Right.
It's like, no, you need an individual that's not going to throw gas on the fire. I know you want them to. I know you want that person.
That just gives us all the more reason, justification to feel the way we do, right?
Yeah.
That feels real cozy.
And so that's the reality is yes, you can get justified and support, or you can get validation and go, yes, you're right. You deserve to feel that way. Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm. Now, let's journal that. Now let's do something with it in a healthy way. But sometimes we get people, we think they're caring when they're like, yeah, you should never take that. Let's call them. Let's like do this. Let's go blow their car up. All these crazy things. You're like, whoa. and that's like, no, we don't want that type of behavior because that promotes more. And now you've got the next generation of what you've created.
Right.
So it's a matter of finding people that will listen and support. And that's why I love your women's group, because the women in there, they'll listen.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll be like, you know what, girl, you're right. You keep talking. You get that stuff off your chest. We love you. We support you. You deserve to be angry. You deserve to be hurt. Now, what are you going to do about it?
Right. Yep.
And that's what you need. That's a real friend. A real friend's going to promote doing something healthy with it.
Right. And get that healing going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. That was fun.
It went fast.
It went so fast. So let's just recap, because I feel like we covered a lot. So first and foremost, your emotions are very important. Please feel them. Give them a nice hug, an appropriate length hug.
Yep. And as long as if you hang on to them too long,
right,
that's unhealthy too. We didn't get to that side of it, but we don't want to hang on. Maybe we can actually talk about that in our next podcast. Is when we marinate too deep into emotions. Maybe not. Maybe we'll have a different topic. Right. I don't know.
But that awareness piece,
but
right?
We're going to
be aware of it. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to give it space to where it needs to be, and then we're going to be able to express it in a very healthy way. You can get physical, like going to move your body, going for a walk, doing jumping jacks, whatever that looks like for you. I love that you said chop wood. Please chop wood instead of punch someone in the face. That's a really good, healthy thing. Good yes. And then be able to communicate it and go into all the different kind of strategies. Really, listener, try it. See what works for you. Some of them will really work well, and some of them will be a hot miss, and that's okay. That's the part about getting curious, right? Being like, wow, finding someone to stand in, be a proxy for me to be able to just kind of speak my mind really worked for me. And that whole journaling thing, that wasn't really for me.
And maybe it's the opposite.
Right.
Yeah.
And either experience is 100% correct and beautiful for you. So, but how are you going to know what does and doesn't work for you if you don't give things a try?
So on mine, it was acknowledge it. Then it's a matter of feel it.
Yes.
Then start to reach down inside that cake and understand what's underneath it.
Right. Yes.
And then learn from it.
Yeah.
What's the lesson in the madness?
Yes.
Yes. If you're angry about it, what's the lesson in the mad mess? Yeah.
Yeah. We think you're awesome. Thank you for listening. As always, we just love and appreciate your support, your ability to take this out into your community and into the people that you love to be able to help them grow and heal and figure out different ways for them to be able to manage their emotions as well. So we will see you, not physically with our eyes, but with our voices next week on the podcast.
Goodbye.